designed to create an emotional response.
I've seen things you won't believe.
More human than human.
Make you question everything.
It's scary because it's almost animal-like, but it's a machine portraying like animal behavior.
Yeah.
That doesn't sit well with me for some reason.
Yeah, I think it's a combination. So so it's what you mentioned. So it's trying to mimic animal sort of movement, but then it doesn't quite mimic it. It doesn't quite walk like a dog. It has this sort of robotic element to it. And then, like when you add the weight in and you start feeling the weight, you're like, oh, this is some serious piece of machinery.
It is. You can sense the weight, can't you?
Yeah.
When it puts its feet down.
Yeah.
When it you can all like, what is that? 40 kilos. So like half.
Yeah.
Maybe 75 kilos. Would I be 78 kilos? Something like that.
Yeah.
So it's more than half my weight.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, it has a presence.
It has and when you kind of root that weight through those legs, which they seem like quite the contact point is quite small, so then you definitely sort of start hearing. Yeah.
Like I've seen a few films recently on the internet of, I think Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort has those robots walking around.
Yeah.
I've also seen some other military applications where they
patrol as in patrolling.
Patrolling.
Yeah.
I've seen it where they all come out of the back of a truck.
Yeah.
And there's like 6 of them come out and they all start to kind of like,
Yeah.
and when you see them cooperating, like one of them is quite intimidating, I think. I mean, you could probably kick it over.
Yeah.
But the idea that 5 or 6 of them come out and start to work cohesively.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's like
arms start to...
Yeah. I mean, that's what they're starting to deploy in Ukraine. Like from what I've heard, they're starting to sort of experiment with robots just to sort of save the people, save the Ukrainian soldiers who are trying to sort of storm the positions. And also, I think in terms of swarms, drones have been used quite a lot during that war, from what I've seen at least, and from all the videos which you can see on X. And now apparently they're experimenting with these swarms, like all these technologies which we've heard about the last 10 or so years, like robotic swarms, robots. They're actually starting to deploy those in that scenario.
What I'm interested to know, Piotr, and we'll get into your history in a little bit, is the robot we've just seen, Max was controlling it.
Yeah.
Max we will have on the Baseline podcast soon to talk more about the whole Boston Dynamics technology and how it's controlled. Where's that moral point where you click self-thinking?
Yes.
Where's that point where you take Max away from his controller, this human in the loop, safety net, and say, go and do whatever you've been programmed to do? How do you get to that point?
Yeah, well, I'd say it's context specific. So again, it depends on your personal situation, how much you actually need that help. So from what I understand, they're actually quite ready to be deployed right now. They could probably help with a lot of things. I think in terms of that sort of type of dog, they've done tests. I think it was years ago, actually, Boston Dynamics in Singapore where deployed such a dog for patrolling in the park. Now, I guess there's a question of society accepting those types of technologies. But if you kind of become quite desperate, maybe you have like massive labor shortages, you don't have people to fill in certain roles, at that point, I'd say, acceptance might happen quite quickly, because if in that context the robots are helping, both the company and perhaps reducing like a pain for society, let's say, you could imagine a hypothetical scenario where you need some sort of government, I guess typically government position, which requires that type of interaction occupied, but no one really wants to do it. And that's the case maybe like picking strawberries, for example. And again, people want strawberries. So you don't necessarily want to sort of price out like large swaths of society out of strawberries because you can't afford the labor to pick them. So in that type of scenario where I think a lot of people, or the majority, realizes the importance of deploying that type of technology, I think that's a good point at which they might get deployed.
So economic. What you're saying is economic.
It's an economic, but also potentially economic, but also like a need. If there's a particular pain, which people clearly see that this solves, maybe even stuff like just picking up garbage from particularly sort of dirty areas. And if it can be deployed economically, I mean, who want like a really nice sort of nice street or side of the highway, motorway? Sometimes you might stop at the motorway stop, and it's sometimes they tend to be like quite filthy, or just like the side of the road. You just stop and actually have a look, like on the way to London. Sometimes you stop in the queue. There's like a traffic jam, a traffic queue. You look outside and there's just like plenty of garbage. So if you could actually pick that up.
But I feel as though people who throw litter, there just need to be really
absolutely
low tolerance levels on people who do that. So cameras, but then you're getting into surveillance state.
Yeah.
The problem with surveillance state is, so if we take that little example, I hate the action of littering.
Yes.
I feel as though it's like one little casual action that affects so many people.
Yeah.
So that whole point about throwing something out of the car on the side of the motorway, it could kind of, yes, you can be mindful and kind of choose to ignore the rot of society, but there could be 100,000 people see that casual, throwing of thing, and the impact of it is so wide. The lack of community or the lack of sense of accountability of your environment must sit within those people for them to do that so casually.
Yeah. But it's not necessarily just people dumping stuff out of windows randomly. It could just be like people bringing out garbage, like in London, like the human density is huge. So you just take your garbage out. There's a high chance that maybe the bag will get torn, and perhaps like a fox will get into there and just make a huge mess, and all of that stuff. There's a little bit of wind. Like London can be quite windy, so all of that sort of scatters in the wind. So it's not necessarily even the people.
True.
In a city, a lot of people also don't take ownership just because of how many people there are. So if you combine all those factors, you'll possibly
the dystopian conclusion is it's a very small minority of people who do things that affect the majority. But why should the majority have to have surveillance on them to ensure they're not being the minority?
Yeah.
So the problem with that exact issue is that a very small percentage of people are creating a surveillance state for everybody.
That's true. That's true. And that's that's.
And I guess the question is, should everybody agree to a degree of surveillance to prevent that minority point, or should it feels like you're giving away a huge amount of freedom and liberty? Why not just isolate the minority?
Well, that's again like the ethical. It's an ethical issue. Like, is it okay to actually just do that to a minority of people, whom through their actions are having, of course, an impact on everyone, or not? Like, what's the sort of ethical middle ground? But that's basically a problem which people have faced for decades, really. I mean, even starting from probably even much earlier. But let's just take the issue of security on airplanes. In the 70s, you could just pretty much show up on an airplane. You wouldn't literally need to buy a ticket at the gate very often. Like, you could literally board on some airlines and just ask for a ticket, like in the airplane. And then, of course, because it became a security threat, like people started hijacking airplanes, take them to sort of Cuba, or just ask for a lot of money, hijacking them. That's why they started introducing security. So, and again, it's like an action, and especially like in more recent years, like with terrorism happening, like in the 2000 years, like you go through all these sort of security checks at the airport. Like, you're quite inconvenienced, like if you think about it. And ultimately, you do it from a safety perspective, even though, like, in principle, I guess it wouldn't be like, even if you wouldn't have those security incidents, they most likely wouldn't be, very common. I'd say, you would have a relatively low relatively low chance of encountering them, although it would be, significantly higher than what it is today.
How can artificial intelligence identify perpetrators and isolate activity around them to avoid the 99.9% of thoughtful, community-driven citizens who just want to get on a plane and fly safely and get off and go to do their work or meet their family? How can you isolate the people who are going to be outside of the rules so the 99.99% don't have to sacrifice and their experience be so low? Like, if we could do that, then airplanes would be so much easier, because the 0.000x% who actually going to do bad things would be removed.
Well,
and everybody doesn't then have to go through a process.
Well, of course, I mean, can imagine that you have like the dystopian example, so you could have the filtering being done like all the time. So basically, you could establish some sort of database and then just observe people throughout their sort of lifetime. But that's like really dystopian. But then you'd be quite safe. Whereas what we kind of have now, it's more limited. It's more like security kind of relates to particular sort of points. And people deploy AI already for like things like face recognition, or for, I think, to some degree, tracking people at the airport already. But it tends to be limited just because of those sort of ethical concerns. But yeah, I mean, if you'd really be very concerned and want to implement it, and this has been done, from what I understand, or is slowly being done in perhaps in China, other societies, you could actually observe people through for a longer time and just sort of observe their behavior, feed that into the database, and actually just do the filtering before they even get to the airport, like not allow them to get to the airport. Now, the question is, of course, that's not really feasible nor actually desirable in our society here. So I guess it's just like it's about finding the middle ground, making sure that it's not that intrusive, and making sure that access to data is limited, and that it can't be really hijacked to do bad things to someone who isn't necessarily a bad person.
You have a PhD in neuroscience.
In neuroscience, absolutely, yeah. Can
you just explain that to somebody who doesn't have a PhD in neuroscience?
Well, it's there are various types of PhDs. So I've done it experimentally. So my work was relating to the cells in the inner ear, to the sensory cells in the inner ear. They're called hair cells, but they're not related to hair cells. Basically, what I was looking at was figuring out how the cells near hair cells, so there's a bunch of cells which are actually non-sensory, which form the basis of the organ of Corey. They kind of form the structure, and they have these very intricate shapes, and a lot of them are actually named after these 19th century German anatomists like Muller cells and Hansen cells, and no one really knows what they do. So I was actually looking at those non-sensory cells in the inner ear, trying to understand how they might affect hair cells, our sensory cells, how they might affect hearing. Now, actually, mammals are relatively unique in that the hearing epithelium, it does not regenerate. So once you start losing hearing, your hair cells, they won't sort of come back. In birds, that's not the case. So,
is that right?
Yeah.
So what birds can regenerate cells within the ear. So if they damage their ear, it can fix, but humans can't.
From what I understand, yes, that's basically what happens. Whereas in humans, who have, like, to be fair, like the shape of the hearing organ, the organ of Corti in humans is more complicated. It's like a spiral. Well, in humans and mammals. So mammals tend to sort of be able to perceive a wider sort of range of sounds in terms of frequency, from lower to higher, whereas that's not the case necessarily with birds. But yeah, the drawback is we can't really regenerate those cells. And once they're gone, they're basically, that's it.
The Boston Dynamics technology and the hearing technology, have they tried to copy how humans hear in a machine?
In a machine? Not really, no. It's not a particularly, I guess, it's just because of how molecules work, how cells work, it's quite tricky to sort of do. Now, from a technology perspective, like, from what I understand, it's much easier to sort of just place a microphone and capture a lot of sounds.
Can that dog hear better than us?
I strongly suspect so, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So in terms of a security application, you're actually creating an enhanced...
Yeah. I mean, so I'm not sure about a particular sensor on the dog, but if you take a number of sensors, right? So with the dog, you can actually link the dog to sensors at various parts of the building. And if you get this sort of combined sensory view from the dog, like how it hears, then yeah, I mean, that would be far more efficient than just one human. And it can interact with the data far more efficiently, I suspect, as well. So if you have a security in the building, yes, I mean, certain threats might get flagged through a monitor, but then, like, kind of the human might be, the place where things also start going wrong, where, like, if they're away or if they're somehow incapacitated, whereas with a dog or with a I guess, a swarm of such dogs, you could you could basically understand what's going on throughout the whole building. You could also sort of add other sensors in terms of, vibrations, like, there were a lot of sort of famous heists. So, for example, here in London, where I think they burrowed underground into like a bank vault. With a robotic dog, you not only get the hearing, where you can, maybe actively actually search for certain sounds through, pattern recognition, deploying machine learning models. You can try to sort of identify certain patterns of sound linked to maybe drilling underground. But then you can also hook up other sensors in it. So you get this combined view, and the dog can then integrate the data from multiple sensors.
This idea of machines, the fact that they're operating to a common data set and they can operate synchronized. And humans obviously fix that with radio communications or digital communications now, but it feels like that's still going through a layer of communication, whereas the machine is speaking to the common data set natively.
Absolutely.
Its very existence is so close to that information.
And I think a huge benefit is that they can basically alive now, if you have the computing power to do it, they can actually look at various patterns of sounds, and then you can identify like long-term activity, which wouldn't necessarily which a human wouldn't necessarily notice. So let's say again you have this hypothetical scenario of someone drilling underneath a bank. Again, there might be some sort of feedback coming, like which humans might be picking up, but they might not be able to sort of link it all together and kind of over, let's say, half a day or so, and then sort of come to the conclusion, okay, this is like a drill underground. This is not normal.
In a number of conversations, this comes under the banner that I call memory.
Yeah.
So the idea that, that the robot has access to memories of all the sounds, somebody jumping over a wall, somebody taking a knife out of a holster or a sheath, those sounds could be pre-trained in the dog's knowledge.
Yeah.
So it will highly accurately identify that, even with increased sensory capability.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that is a fascinating idea, that these machines have a full memory, a memory that goes beyond what they've been exposed to themselves.
Yeah. Well, it's the filtering capability, and it's not even because you can just link the machine to like a like a cloud sort of set of memories, I guess. So then even like this memory doesn't even necessarily have to reside with the dog, but it would be just like centralized.
It's a yes.
And then you could even devise a scenario where from a business perspective, you have various companies specializing in various types of patterns, sound patterns, so identifying those, or different types of data patterns incoming to such robotic dogs, so that you might have a different sort of set, or you might want to link it to a different set of patterns if your dog is like an inspection dog, inspecting like a bridge for damage, or like an inspection drone, and you might want to sort of have different patterns when you have a dog guarding, or a robotic dog guarding a bank.
Sound is fascinating to me. I have a very good friend who actually created the music for the podcast. He's somebody who I would say is probably one of the most intelligent people I know.
Yeah.
And he didn't go to university, he didn't go through, he hasn't been through what you would say is the traditional academic route to build knowledge and intelligence.
Yeah.
All he's done from a very young age is play music.
Yes.
He has the ability to play any musical instrument.
Yeah.
He has the ability to create soundscapes and music, which I think is fascinating. And I had this theory that his intelligence had grown through his exposure to music and sound, and being like that whole 30-year journey he's been on, creating sounds, turning them into cohesive musical pieces, understanding the way that melodies and methods and all of this work has somehow advanced his intellectual muscle beyond what other people may have got in academia.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So that's neuroplasticity. So basically the connections between neurons in the brain, like they can strengthen, they can weaken, like new connections can form. So that's how learning happens, for example. That's also like the role of sleep, where during sleep, and again, I'm not an expert in this field, but basically you recall what happened during the day, and then you kind of remove the parts which are not that meaningful to you. And the parts which are meaningful, which you want to learn, I guess, those connections get reinforced. So that's also why people kind of get better, like how you get, I guess, experience. You start seeing certain patterns. Your I guess brain starts to be tuned to a particular way of thinking. Depends on what industry you're in, So in his case, yeah, I could certainly see him becoming a bit more attuned to sort of music, and kind of developing like a higher understanding of how to sort of make music in a efficient and a good way. Yeah.
As we age, how do we retain neuroplasticity? How do we ensure that is in a state of ongoing development and challenge?
Yeah, it's an inherent property of the brain that the brain is neuroplastic. Now, and again, I'm not necessarily an expert in this field, so there are certain, I guess, when a child sort of grows up, with language, for example, I mean, there are certain time periods when a child can learn a language, and past that time period, like those connections, apparently they can't be formed in that good of a way. But in general, with learning, yes, so the neuroplasticity is there, and again, there are, I think, various ways of people have been trying to hack it, like maybe taking certain substances. But in general, I think it's what a lot of people say, so just like plenty of sleep, good exposure to sort of new ideas, just avoiding monotony, that possibly is a bit of a killer, and just like staying active, staying socially active. That actually ticks a lot of the boxes where you have interesting conversations, you have stimulating conversations, you're exposed to new information. So to a degree, I guess new information that's required, that kind of promotes neuroplasticity. In rats, at least, you call this like an enriched environment.
Rats, people, come on, Piotr, it's all the same.
So in rats, like when scientists do this, like they tend to sort of have this enriched environment in the cage where it's not just like a drab little cage. It has maybe some rat toys, and that helps to promote neurotoxicity. So it's all this sort of enrichment, which you would get maybe from being socially active, just getting a lot of sleep, just dealing even with new concepts, new ideas, learning new things. That seems to be really key. Just
to keep challenging yourself.
To keep challenging yourself, yeah. Don't get to the stage where you're not doing
just
much.
Repetition.
Exactly, and then things tend to go badly.
Ultimately, it can be easy to get to a stage where every day is the same, where everything, you find the things that you like and you just do that.
Yeah.
And people get into and then 10, 15 years pass, and kind of they've gone from 35 to 50.
Yeah.
And there's this period maybe when they had children, or that repetition just kind of zeroed that into a very monotone existence.
Yes.
So I guess what you're saying, keep challenging yourself, because the problem is to challenge yourself, you've got to make yourself uncomfortable to meet new people, try new things, and you get to an age where. Do you want to go back to the beginning again?
Yes.
Some people probably are quite averse to that.
Yeah.
So they do the things that they have experience in.
Yeah.
Whereas what you're suggesting is what they really need to do is get out of the comfort zone and do, even though it's going to fail or maybe go wrong, don't be frightened of that, just get stuck in.
Well, to some extent, but even if you have your routine, as long as it kind of includes those elements of doing new things, like you might be a scientist, let's say, and then like as part of your routine, you're actually dealing with new ideas, new concepts, potentially new people like every day. So it doesn't necessarily mean like drop everything and just like completely change your life. It's just sort of having this, I guess, vibrant life, whether or not it's really focused on one thing. Like as long as you love it, I guess that's when people are most productive, when they find something which they're really good at and they really enjoy it, and it doesn't matter if it's kind of a bit of a routine, as long as it's keeps their interest and they kind of develop in their I guess brand or in whatever they're doing. I'd say. Yeah.
Look, what inspired you to go from neuroscience, hair cells in the ear, to tech entrepreneurship?
Yeah.
How did Elon Musk inspire you on that journey?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So actually, it was the experiments themselves in a way contributed to that. So when you're doing a PhD, usually there's some sort of funding and time pressure. So you have kind of secured resources, which means basically your salary and perhaps like some funding for the experiments for a given number of, I guess, years, months. And then effectively, really, to sort of continue on, you maybe need to sort of publish some results, and then based on those published results, you can get like an extra funding. That's how science tends to work. So it's not really where you get a set salary, and then you're supposed to sort of do stuff, but at least in the academic sense, you're kind of project-based, so it goes from project to project. So a PhD is basically your kind of first major project like that. Now the issues start when you're kind of doing a bit of an experimental PhD, where you can't really necessarily write code to get you results, or you can't look at that data set which already exists. Effectively, your goal, at least from a neuroscience perspective in an experimental PhD, is actually obtain new data. And that's non-trivial because, of course, you're dealing with living cells, you're potentially dealing with living organisms, and a lot of this is out of your control. So you might have a hypothesis that, you're just testing an idea, which in theory should be quite interesting. It's going to create a breakthrough. But then you've done all the experiments, and actually the data says, well, actually it's not happening that way. Like the old hypothesis is valid, and or you might not even get to the stage where you obtain all your data, just because the process of obtaining the data from cells, that can become quite complicated when you're recording the activity of individual ion channels within the cell. So I was doing these types of experiments, and with this in mind, basically kind of worried about their outcome. So these experiments were relatively difficult to sort of do, and you need to set up at least a few hours to set up the experiment, and then you could ruin it quite quickly.
Were you using any artificial intelligence products within your experimentation?
Yeah.
Like, I think you mentioned that some of these technologies have helped streamline your work.
Yeah. Well, later on. So at the time, basically, I was doing these fairly complicated experiments, and just to sort of relax a bit, because I was overthinking, I was worried that I would ruin it, I just listened to podcasts and ended up somehow listening to entrepreneurs. And at the time, Tesla was just rising up, so they just kind of released their Model S, or were about to release it. And that got me quite inspired in entrepreneurship, because I realized that actually, as a scientist, I'm doing some of these entrepreneurial things, such as kind of producing research, so that's the product, and then convincing my colleagues, like selling it, that this research is valid, convincing them to fund further research. So my thinking was, okay, I mean, I could do this, based on just this grant system, but perhaps as an entrepreneur, I could actually get actual sort of resources here, like money, and then really sort of continue the research kind of independently of that, or actually do something else. So that was what kind of brought me initially to the idea of trying to sort of get into technology and understand it.
You were hugely inspired by Tesla. I mean, what Elon does very well is excite people.
Yeah.
Whether it's catching that, did you see the catching of that rocket?
Yes.
That was unbelievable.
That was, yeah.
Everybody I speak to about that gets super excited.
Yes, yeah.
And the Cybertruck.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
That's really cool, yeah.
I mean, and in terms of a marketing exercise and a product, I mean, what I read yesterday was that, the Cybertruck is already being positioned as a Mars vehicle. So everything, like what Elon has done is created this single compounding vision that all his companies, all his innovation works towards.
Yeah.
And when you're buying a Cybertruck, I don't think they'll ever have them in the UK. I mean, the thing is like a steel box.
I know.
I don't know how that's going to get through pedestrian crash protection. But I mean, it looks like an amazing truck. But you're kind of buying into saving humanity. Yeah. Whether you're buying an electric normal Tesla, you're kind of playing to the environmental, climate change narrative. All these products. You've got the free speech narrative when it comes to the X, formerly Twitter. There's obviously all these products are, companies, Starlink. The idea of connectedness, how that's been applied in North Carolina. Yeah. You're buying into a bigger vision, which seems to have hugely inspired you.
Well, yeah. I think basically like early on, especially when Tesla was struggling, I think there was like a Tesla death watch. It kind of inspired me, like just seeing someone, just trying to sort of do something completely new, going against, I guess, current thinking. So at the time, actually, it was GM. So GM had this electric car at the time, or maybe a little bit earlier, called the EV1. And when they released it, so they didn't release that many. I think it was maybe a few hundred, or maybe a few thousand. I mean, you could really sort of tend to, I like kind of betting on the underdog. So that really kind of inspired me. And I thought just the idea of having an electric car, which runs quite smoothly, that's just really fun. And just the idea that I guess Tesla was really doing something quite novel and going against, I guess, established thinking. I really enjoyed that.
What you've suggested, which I kind of like, is this idea that, and I always thought there was a big separation between academia and vocation and business and entrepreneurship, but it sounds like a lot of the values of doing a PhD, like selling your idea, raising funding, applying that funding in a very efficient way to give you the best chance to prove a thesis that you yourself are questioning. You know, it sounds like there's a lot of dynamics, like, which is essentially a product market fit question, right?
Yeah.
So it sounds like when you're running a PhD program, you are an entrepreneur. I wonder if there's some opportunity there for, you know, lessons learned in entrepreneurship, or to kind of just be better together.
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, definitely from the business perspective. So knowing academia quite well, when I went on to learn a bit about business, like from the efficiency perspective from the perspective of how you run projects. I mean, there's definitely like an opportunity for academia to sort of take a lot of that stuff on board, because I think like, well, it is changing slightly, like with programs at universities, but basically, often there's really no formal training on how to actually run a project. So you're kind of trusting the scientists that they will, you know, run the project, and usually it's absolutely fine because, you know, they kind of know their topic, they know how to apply it. But I think having a little bit, you know, that business perspective of how to run a project efficiently, how to deploy those resources, how to kind of coordinate things within a group, that would probably be helpful.
Well, a lot of this is in the consumer AI technology, like ChatGPT.
Yeah.
You know, very compelling at kind of supporting writing proposals, maybe putting together a business case. These type of pieces of content that maybe are alien to people who've sat within academia. They can quickly spin up something like, even legal documents. I mean, those templates can be spun up and customized within seconds.
Yes, that is true. I mean, and I think academics tend to use them increasingly, but it's almost like just the awareness of the possibilities. I think like having, you know, gone into the business world also, it gives you a little bit more, well, it gives you some perspective of what the possibilities are. So once you actually know those possibilities, and you don't need a lot of time, like I guess, having the business perspective to understand them, once you know them, then you can certainly deploy those tools quite efficiently, because it's like really easy these days.
So do you use artificial intelligence to support you?
Yeah, so I use it, well, more in the business context, but yeah, I guess because from an academic perspective, you really have to sort of trust sources, and with ChatGPT, it's maybe, I think it's improving, but it's still not necessarily that good. It can get you started. So if like a certain, I guess, subdiscipline is new to you, and you just want to sort of build up an understanding, an initial understanding of, you know, what is this about and where should I look to achieve whatever I want to achieve, you know, it's pretty good at giving this introduction. But like if you really want to get into the sort of details, then you have to sort of, you know, resort to sort of doing stuff manually, like the old school way. So from that perspective, it's actually pretty cool. And also like stuff like proposals, outlining a proposal, giving you the inspiration. Like the most difficult part with the proposal is, of course, getting these sort of initial points in, like what should I write in a given sort of paragraph? How should I go about explaining the strategy here? So it's helpful. It's helpful from that perspective. I guess, yeah, there's the perspective also of innovation. So you really have to be quite innovative. And well, with ChatGPT, I mean, I'm not sure it's that good. I'm not sure it fully generates new ideas. I think it synthesizes established ideas and what is available.
The value to an entrepreneur surely is they have the idea.
Yeah.
They have the conviction behind their idea.
Yeah.
It's those stages of execution.
Yeah, absolutely.
That traditionally have had barriers to entry, usual commercial barriers, the cost for lawyers, the cost for a sales lead, the cost for somebody to help with documentation, the cost for document review. I feel that, yes, you know, it may not be 100%, but the commercial barrier to entry is lower, which I think has to be a good thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. For an entrepreneur right now, it's like really helpful to have those types of technologies, just because, again, you're dealing with multiple sort of topic areas like legal, like, you know, technology. Perhaps you've never built a website and you need a website. So just sort of starting out, figuring out even just how things are named in a given industry, that's like really helpful, because then you can take a line of code which you're trying to sort of use as basis for something. So you have like, you're building a website, or maybe like a web-based app. in a particular, in a particular framework like ASP.NET. You've never worked with that. Perhaps you don't have that much experience with C#. You just sort of plug it into ChatGPT, and you can just say, okay, explain this. And by the way, there are these instructions here. They mentioned this very particular sort of technical term. What does it mean? So it's really good at sort of, helping you understand how to go about doing things and how to get started with the technology. And really, at least from a programming perspective, from what I've noticed, it's so I started learning it before ChatGPT was around, and I started learning from a standpoint where I wasn't really programming anything. I didn't know what an object was in programming, or how functions would work, how you could use functions. And I kind of needed to sort of work it out through Stack Overflow myself a lot of times. Whereas with ChatGPT, you can literally get it to sort of explain a particular concept to you in simple terms which you understand.
In natural language.
In natural language. And what you find is actually, all those technical terms, you're wondering this must be super complicated. It's actually really simple. They just have these kind of unnatural ways of, not called in a easy to understand way, or the instructions aren't explained in a way where, a human who hasn't done any programming might understand.
Do you speak to ChatGPT in English or Polish?
English. I haven't actually tried speaking to it in Polish. That would be interesting to see if how good it is.
Do you think Stack Overflow's done?
Well, so from what I understand, they've closed. They might have closed it off now. So what happened is, again, from what I understand, basically ChatGPT used perhaps some of the data on Stack Overflow to train the models. Whereas what people quite quickly realized is those types of databases have inherent value, and they've closed it off to those types of models, or maybe they've deployed their own models. I think, I wouldn't necessarily be, so I don't know what, if Stack Overflow is public, if it's basically a company which can do this, but effectively you could imagine a situation where you have your Stack Overflow chatbot or intelligent Stack Overflow, which is actually trained on all the data which is available on Stack Overflow. And that's, I think, also the case with X and the sort of AI assistant on X, where basically X is used, data from X is used to train the AI, which is specific to X. So perhaps that speaks a little bit about the future, where maybe you'll have some general models like ChatGPT, which have relatively good knowledge, but when you're looking to search a particular database, when you're looking into a particular technical subject area, you might have a very well dedicated model which is trained on the data itself in that area. So really it's the data which has become very, valuable now.
100%. And it brings me to a question that I picked up on something you said earlier that I think is really good practice. And you said in academia, the source of information is extremely important.
Yeah.
So going back to source.
Yeah.
Which suggests that academia is building upon knowns. We know about this, and we're building upon them. So firstly, academia feels like it's evolving based on known information and known facts.
Yeah.
And as you push this academic boundary forward, you're kind of connecting back to the root of information that maybe was some pre-work that kind of moved this.
Yeah.
You're kind of moving things forward.
Yeah.
The very nature of closed AI models, other than if there's litigation, probably in the case of Stack Overflow, they do not. Well, they can cite sources to its answers, but the question whether it had legal access to the source information, and compliant, regulatory compliant access, I suppose is questionable.
Yeah. Well, what was that? There was, I think, one image generation model. I think it was trained up on Getty images, illegally.
Really?
To the degree where it was actually reproducing the Getty logo on generated images.
Do you know, I had a friend who he had an engineering company, and they had pumps, water pumps or some sort of fluid pump. It could have been for hydraulics. And they would buy these pumps in Germany. Yeah. They buy the pumps in Germany, very expensive piece of kit, very reliable. And they took them, and we're going back 10 years now, they took them to a factory in China and they said, could you disassemble this pump and produce something with equivalent maintenance schedule, with equivalent liters per second flow. So all of the key points about this pump, the weight of it, its metal quality, etc. Yeah. And the factory in China said, we'll have a look at it.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks later, he got a big box at home, opened the box,
Yeah.
pulled out this pump, and immediately he thought something must be wrong. And he asked his business partner to come up and said, they've sent us the wrong pump. He said, why is that? He said, well, it says made in Germany on it. It says made in Germany. And they checked the packaging. It was from the Chinese factory. What they've done is replicate the pump.
The whole thing.
To the exact dimensions
Yeah.
and settings,
Yeah.
including
Yeah.
the pressed made in Germany
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Now, this was 10 years ago. And I won't mention any of the company
Yeah.
names.
Yeah.
But I thought that idea of creating a lower cost by exactly replicating
Yeah.
that. Now, I think China seems to be a long way ahead in some sophistication of marketing, the sophistication of the cities and the communities. So this was from a previous point. But this point on ChatGPT and closed models essentially taking other data sets and replicating in their answers to kind of capture value feels, well, it's immoral, whether it's illegal or not.
I guess now it's become a little bit, I think, clarified, where a lot of those databases have closed off or deployed their own models. But yeah, initially, absolutely. But that's almost like the mantra of break things and then ask for forgiveness later, effectively. So
Which is what they've done.
Which is what they've done, I think. But the other point also is. And I think from a manufacturing perspective, it's almost like equivalent, where the data would determine the quality of the output in the case of AI, whereas with manufacturing, again, it's like the expertise. So yes, you might be able to sort of replicate the structure of a pump and all the details, but like getting the material right, getting some of the processes, like maybe some of the things which in the pump which move, getting that all set up, like there's a lot of knowledge which might actually go into this, or might not, but often it does. And that's actually the tricky thing to replicate from, I guess, a manufacturing.
How is intellectual property respected in a world that's predominantly led by artificial intelligence?
Yeah, that's a good question. From what I understand right now, it's all kind of based on how it has been. So really, the owner of the intellectual property is the person who made it. So that's kind of the artist. Now, I guess you can imagine some sort of royalty model where perhaps the owner of the AI model, they actually pay for access to certain data on a per-use basis. So it's a little bit like how Spotify actually gathers a lot of artists on Spotify, and then pays them depending on how the data is used. You could imagine a situation where if actually an AI model accesses some sort of data a lot or less, it could be like based on billing based on how much a given data set is being accessed, for example. Or some sort of deal like that, where basically the company which owns the data, it leases the data out to companies who want to use it.
Interesting. So there could be new commercial models emerge within this world of AI consuming data to produce inferencing.
Yes, absolutely.
So the XAI emergence, I believe is going to be huge over the next 12 months.
Yeah.
When I analysed the US election, you could see that each billionaire was kind of aligned to a separate. You had Anthropic and Amazon. You have obviously the Microsoft and their strange AGI contract with ChatGPT and OpenAI. Elon was there with XAI, his own platform. There's obviously Google and Gemini. There are various big LLM providers. And watching how the election played out, and now what an absolute pivotal role Elon Musk has in US policymaking and US governance.
Yes.
As I understand, he was on the phone call to Zelensky in Ukraine, which probably is, who knows, but I'm sure Starlink is deployed. There'll be also. So I have to feel that XAI is going to become more important in everybody's lives over the next 12 months. Trying to get somebody from XAI to talk to has been quite difficult because we don't see that technology in enterprise. It's kind of the Grok and is emerged in this almost humorous way within the X platform. But now, it's being offered and encouraged to be used for oncology scans and cancer scan analysis. So it's getting serious.
Well, I guess it's one of the things which kind of jumps out at me from this is like depends how you market it as well. That's a big thing. Like depends if you can sell electric cars. Like depends how you market them. If you can't sell AI, it depends how you market we market AI and to whom. Like, perhaps if you market AI as a more sort of friendly, more joke kind of less averse, less averse sort of technology, then you could sort of sell it potentially to a different sort of set of people.
I'm not sure I'd trust a comedian to analyze my cancer scans.
Yeah, well, it's I guess it's not to sort of emphasize the joke element, but just make it kind of friendly and approachable. And with that sort of image, it might actually get used by more people who would typically, try to sort of avoid using, alternative sort of providers of those types of technologies, just because they might be concerned that it's not it's not helpful. It's just like some sort of company gathering data. So I think it's basically how you approach it to a large extent. I think that might determine success. Also, like with Tesla, I think they've been incredibly successful, and I think potentially that's because, well, first of all, they weren't necessarily worried about innovating, developing new models of cars in a way which all the established manufacturers were, and then they were quite clear that they were risking failure, and that spoke to a lot of people who really appreciate that sort of thinking.
This intersection of AI, machine learning, and transportation seems to sit very much in your power zone at the moment, Piotr.
Yeah.
And I can actually see, your passion for this intersection of AI and machine learning within transportation is fascinating. And I want to talk a little bit about the economic downside of where we are with motorways and, mega brands that dominate the motorway economy. Yeah. That whole motorway economy feels like a monopoly in some ways. And we'll come to that. But just as a prelude to that, you spent some time applying machine learning at one of the UK's biggest airports, Heathrow. You were working on...
So not particularly machine learning, although there were some, I guess there are some technologies where you could apply machine learning within an airport. So I wasn't really yet looking at that aspect, but I was looking at various technologies, which could then actually be linked to sort of machine learning systems, which would improve runway capacity at Heathrow. So Heathrow, right now I think it's again back quite high. I mean, it's basically one of the busiest airports, if not again the busiest in Europe, and it's relatively small. It only has like two runways. So the way that you have to coordinate aircraft coming in and have appropriate safety margin, I mean that's a significant problem. And then you have things like the impact of delays. I mean, you could sort of plan things out ideally, but there will always be unforeseen circumstances, maybe some en route delays, maybe some delays at the airport itself. Perhaps the weather will deteriorate, and then you kind of have to adjust those flows to sort of, again, accommodate aircraft. So that was effectively what I was doing at Heathrow. I was trying to sort of figure out which technologies, how to structure them, how to introduce them, how to deploy them at the airport to optimize traffic flows at the airport.
You were in this scenario where safety, congestion, that they're all in this space where you're leveraging technology. And then you have this neuroscience background which has transitioned into entrepreneurship. And this passion around Tesla has led you to apply all of this knowledge and credibility to what I think is a fascinating technology in electro. Yeah. And the one issue I have seen is how mobility changes demographics and anthropology in the very much way we live. The motorway economy and fueling of combustion engines. You see the same brands, you see the same companies. Every motorway is the same. We know that franchise model works really well. Yeah. However, it closes off the diversity and authentism of place. Yeah. So wherever you are in the UK, you see the same brands. Yeah. Costa Coffee, which is owned by the Coca-Cola company, I've just found out. M&S, you see the same companies. Not 200-300 meters from there will be the most amazing local butcher. Yeah. You'll have amazing coffee shops, places for family. Yeah. You'll find and it'll be an expression of place. Yes. There'll be families, there'll be people that have worked and know the place. It could be local services, but those services could be, for recreation.
Yes.
They could be for, food, drink, pet, all these different things, and they're lost as we kind of thunder through in this optimization for time that's based on, probably from the 60s. Motorways were about not enjoying the journey, getting to the destination, and we totally get that. I totally get that. However, I've found myself, certainly in the last few years, yearning to connect to place, to enjoy, experiences that are unique to place. That northeast of England, I think, is a very, very beautiful place with amazing history, geological heritage, amazing people, which are lost as you kind of thunder through on the motorway. Now, when we've talked about the proliferation of electric chargers and the more decentralized nature of that, and connecting that to place, for me, there just seems to be a joyful opportunity to connect those businesses, those people, those experiences with people who use electric vehicles.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, electricity is everywhere. Like, that's a huge advantage of electric vehicles compared to...
Yeah, you don't need a 20,000 litre truck to deploy 20,000 litres of fossil fuel. Electric is everywhere. So why not be more distributed and decentralised in the way we think about journeys and pleasure and work?
Well, certainly. And also you don't need to... Yeah, there are situations where you really want to sort of minimize the recharge time, but you don't have to do it like on every stop. Like during any journey, there will be periods when you want to stop for a little longer.
So ElectroApp is fundamentally about revitalizing economies that have been lost through our adoption of motorways and direct journeys, and revitalizing them through when people are in an EV and they want to charge, see that as an opportunity for an experience.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of thinking about the charging stop as lost time, let's just sort of think about it as an opportunity to sort of, have a unique personalized experience and sort of connect with local community or with whatever you want to connect. So combine charging with other activities. That's effectively what we're attempting to do.
So if I had a business, in the northeast, away from the motorway infrastructure, that maybe does a petting farm, that sells local ice cream from the milk from the cows, you have just, families, kids would love that. How would I? The problem is that they will rely on, a website, maybe social media. Yes, definitely social media, local knowledge. But the addressable market is fairly closed because a lot of people won't be searching for that. So how does ElectroApp and how does AI play to connecting people to joyful experiences?
So effectively, we're building a central register which allows drivers to quite easily and quickly find the charge points with the infrastructure which they need, which they enjoy. We make it easy for the drivers to get the experience from the charging stop which they want. So in this centralized way, if you have a central place with this information, then even small shops, small independent shops, they can very easily reach out to a lot of drivers. And also, with the use of artificial intelligence, like it's possible to suggest certain types of stops based on past charging history, based on drivers' own preferences. And again, like for me, like the amount of times I've been surprised during a charging stop by like something really nice, that's always been like a really positive experience. So I think effectively, like it doesn't have to be a driver searching for a particular amenity, as long as they know, or we make it easy for the driver to identify that there's a particular amenity at a given charging stop. That's a huge benefit.
Well, it is. And I was reflecting on, when we got the Boston Dynamics dog out at lunchtime, everybody went from kind of this quiet, subdued lunch to there felt like a real buzz and joy in the room. People were up, they were filming it, they were like, oh, I've seen it parked, I've never seen it operate. There felt like a genuine energy and joy. But the challenge that I'm having is that, if you're not searching for that experience, how can it suggest it? How can it give you this surprise, joyful surprise? Like, how could AI be used to genuinely make? Because when you think EV, there's even like industry terms, range anxiety, anxiety that somebody's planting this idea that owning an electric vehicle comes with anxiety. And guess what, Piotr? I avoid anything that brings anxiety.
So I think, so I basically would say opportunity. It's an opportunity to actually find something joyful, interesting. The goal almost is like once people driving an EV, and you realize this after a bit of time driving an EV, like coming from a petrol car, it's only like it took me a while to realize this. But if you start thinking of it as an opportunity, like not a waste of time, but just as an opportunity to sort of accomplish something else, combined with charging your car, because you're going to have to be at the charging station for a little bit of time anyway. Once you actually realize that actually, it's like a light bulb sort of laying up in your head, and then you're just searching for ways to accomplish this. And even, I mean, in terms of connecting to new places, again, I mean, you can establish based on who the driver is. You could, just based on what their preferences are, you could establish with AI which types of experiences might be useful to them, which might be interesting to them, which could be highlighted to them during the trip.
When you say AI, are you meaning machine learning or generative AI?
I think machine learning for the most part. Yeah. You could perhaps use generative AI. Not sure if you could use this, like you wouldn't generate like an image or anything, but you might generate, let's say, some set of like a prediction about
an itinerary.
An itinerary, yeah, exactly. Or like a prediction about what could be interesting from a driver. Like even if they haven't indicated it, kind of combine information about what they have indicated that they have an interest in, combined with, let's say, anything else which they want to input, or the types of journeys which they make, and kind of infer something about what could be a joyful experience. Because again, like from what I've noticed, it's like you don't necessarily know these things. It's like you stop at a charging station, you start searching for what's nearby, and then you just discover something, and you're like, okay, I had no idea I could actually do this whilst charging. I had no idea that I could actually visit this independent coffee shop whilst charging, and this will be actually fun.
There was a component in our earlier conversation where we talked about how generative AI, almost you feel more confident when you're using it around documents, and it gives you a degree of confidence. If this machine learning and was integrated into the vehicle, and that vehicle had some form of generative AI capability, it could give you a sense of comfort that it's accountable for itself.
Absolutely.
So the vehicle itself isn't saying, I'm going to run out of battery in 15 miles. I'm blaming you because you haven't charged me.
Yeah.
What it's actually saying, from using generative AI and its machine learning underneath, it's saying, I'm going to orientate us around, you've got the kids, there's a great petting zoo, family zoo experience with coffee and toilets. Yeah. I'm going to go there. We're going to charge 15 minutes. Yeah. We're going to get, it's becoming the vehicle is becoming more of an active participant in the journey itself.
Yeah.
And as a driver, you're getting this sense of comfort that it's optimizing, one, for a custom experience for you and your passengers, but also it's taking accountability over its charging and its health, which totally removes anxiety.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's already done. Like when a car gets low on charge, like a lot of these cars, they actually suggest like a place to charge. Just now, it's just based on distance, so it's just like literally the closest place where you could recharge your car without, accounting for really anything else. But yeah, I mean, in general, like this technology, it's similar, like how AI can inspire you. Like what I've noticed, like even just with any other applications, let's say, writing a proposal, it really it gives you the capacity, or increases the capacity for you to really focus on the strategy to sort of accomplish something really efficiently. So I think from a journey perspective, again, it's like the same, where, it will help you, again, personalize and really focus on the elements which are important to you during the journey, which you want to serve. Basically, ensure that you stop thinking about it as a stop, but start thinking about it as an opportunity really to accomplish, whatever you want to sort of do, have the experience, whichever you want to have. So focus more on the sort of higher type of, problems instead of, the low problem of just finding like a plug somewhere. So it's similar, I guess, with let's say creating a project proposal, where effectively, a lot of your time in the past has been just really just writing down, figuring out how to structure it, whereas you get like a little bit of help with the sort of structuring. You get like all the bases covered. You don't have to think about the stuff like, what exactly should I have in the introduction? What should I introduce? You get a good outline from AI, which you can modify, of course, if you want. But then really can focus on adding the information which you want to add to that efficiently. So I think it's a similar situation with, let's say, a car journey, where effectively you don't have to focus on the element of finding the stop, of worrying about where to plug in and how to journey there. Then you can just focus on what you really want to sort of accomplish, the experience which you want to have during the journey. I'd say that's how AI could be deployed in this concept. So really, it's not necessarily that difficult how you would use AI, during whatever else task you do.
There's a huge amount of privacy concerns, security concerns, tracking, surveillance. There's a lot. Like, if I actually focused on the inhibitors for allowing automation, and self-led automation in vehicles or security dogs or robots, you can start to think of a whole list of inhibitors. And they seem, I feel like all this technology is going to move us to this level where, unless we can get over that common issue to all of them, we won't go any further. So whether it's allowing the security dog to start thinking for itself, whether we're allowing the vehicle to take accountability for its own charging, self-piloted aeroplanes, it's how do you think humanity will get over that hump?
So I think it's kind of what we, where we might have started actually this discussion earlier, where effectively once it gets utilitarian enough for people to really stop, like there is a point at which you kind of stop caring. I mean, it's like the same with Google, where Google effectively uses what you input into the computer to sort of refine their searches to some extent. Google and other companies, not to sort of name Google in this way, like they're not unique from that perspective, but they use your data to sort of, for their own purposes, really. And they provide you with a product which is very, very useful to you.
So you think just over iterations, generations and people become increasingly desensitized to this idea of the machine being self-regulating?
And then also I guess there's a question of, seeing, like you could deploy technology in a way where people realize that, okay, this is really tracking me, this is really inconveniencing me. I'm getting tracked, like my driving is being tracked. And now, there's this whole driving history and I can't get insurance in a good way. So it's trying to avoid those types of pitfalls where basically, you realize that this data is actually being used for purposes which aren't necessarily, consistent with your own good, like, paying cheap insurance, and it might get used against you. So I think it's the balance between, ensuring that people can have the utility of AI, like get the benefits of using AI without necessarily using the data, using this information about them to really cause them some sort of harm in the future, whether it's like higher insurance rates or so on.
So Piotr, you have a PhD in neuroscience. You have applied that successfully within academia, and you've transitioned to the application of data science within extremely business critical and infrastructure critical applications. You've started to share how you use generative AI to kind of augment your academic and scientific specialism. We've talked through this unlocking of joyful experiences and remodeling of mobility for people to give them a deep sense of enjoyment and remove anxiety using artificial intelligence, not like machine learning, but potentially integrate with generative AI. Do you believe humanity will leverage AI to a utopia or a dystopia?
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, from my perspective, so I like a good dystopian story. So
don't we all?
Right. I can sort of see a lot of pathways to dystopia, definitely. But I think there was I was listening, I think, to one of your conversations with a guest, and I think it was about like just AI unlocking a lot of time, making people redundant, and then the question was like, what do people do with all this time? And then to some extent, actually, I think that has been answered, like to some extent, like in the past. So that's exactly what happened in some of these early societies, like Egypt or Neolithic Europe, where eventually, like once your basic needs are met in terms of food, water, just like safety, like people start organizing and then doing things. I mean, maybe some, from our perspective at least, might be less smart than others, like maybe building a big pyramid. It's not necessarily like a priority these days, but I mean, the reason that, these things exist, it's exactly that. Like those people had an excess of time, and actually a lot of time, if you think about it in today's terms. Like literally they had nothing else to do. Like there was like food provided already. There was enough food. So what do you do? What do you do at that time? Well, you can kind of harness the power of people and keep them occupied, and maybe build like a huge pyramid, or maybe drag some huge boulders from up north in the UK, bring them south. All right. So I think to some extent that might be what happens. Hopefully in a more well, from their perspective, it was useful what they were doing. So I think from a hopefully equally useful perspective of today's society, like what this access time could be used for. So there could be like huge sort of projects which involve people, which might be useful, like building various types of infrastructure perhaps, or helping to sort of design various types of infrastructure which would be useful for society. I think definitely there will always be a group of people who just wants to go their way, and for that group of people, like AI tools, they provide a lot of help, sort of starting out the project, starting out a company. Maybe they want to sort of try something in particular. So all that really sort of enables like a single entrepreneur really to sort of build an app, build a technology, and just accomplish what they want. And with the access of time, I think again, like people tend to sort of want to band with others. So I think there will be, it's just not necessarily dystopian, this vision, but it will give people, it will ensure that, or I think, the world will become much more interesting, because it will be much more easy to implement your idea, implement a unique idea, whether or not it's a really good one or a bad one. I think through AI, like these types of things it will be possible to accomplish them much more easily. Yeah. So in general, I mean, I can see how it can go bad, but in a way, I think there's a lot of scope for good, and keeping people interested, and kind of making those neuronal connections, having this sort of brain plasticity, like having this exposure to sort of new ideas, new things, new types of collaborations, which AI can kind of help with, especially with the extra time if people have, which people might have. Maybe they'll focus on less utilitarian things and more things intellectual, which will kind of help us develop technology in the long run, and bring us closer to the stars. Or yeah.